Can Goku breathe in space? This question has been asked for years and years, and the answer is unclear. Or is it? Well, on this edition of the Dragon Ball In-Depth series, we examine all aspects of this riddle and attempt to come to a clear, unanimous conclusion.
この放送はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
When you apply actual science based on the real world, then the question really becomes irrelevant. Mammals cannot survive in space no matter what, and it's not just because you can't breathe. In real life, if you are put into a vacuum of space, your bowels and lungs would immediately evacuate your body. The pressure in space would turn your bodily fluids into a gaseous substance. Your skin would stretch and swell. The ultraviolet radiation without an atmosphere would instantly burn your skin to the 10th power. The capillaries in your skin will burst, and eventually your brain and you will most likely die within 15 seconds. But of course, Dragon Ball is not the real world. The reason why this question is so difficult to answer is because there are a number of mistranslations, misunderstandings, fan headcanon, and contradictory events within both the manga and the anime that can sway your train of thought. If we go back to very early in Dragon Ball, Goku uses the Nyoibo to take the Rabbit Gang to the moon and leaves them there. The moon is over 238,000 miles away from Earth, and even though the Dragon Ball universe isn't the same as ours, there is nothing in the story that would directly contradict this distance. So right there is the first example of Goku having no issues whatsoever breathing or surviving in space. I've heard a few theories in the community that Goku was able to do this due to his ability to control his ki and create an invisible barrier around himself, thus allowing him to survive the vacuum, coupled with the fact that he can hold his breath for a very long time. This is mostly fan-made speculation, but it's not a bad theory. But of course, the Rabbit Gang scene was always meant to be a gag and not to be taken seriously, but we have to include it in the discussion. But that whole scene is tossed out the window when we get to the Dragon Ball Z part of the story, and that's where things get confusing. During the Namek arc, there are a number of scenes in the anime of Goku wearing a spacesuit, specifically one filler episode where Goku has to fix the spaceship which was steering off course and headed directly for a star. Goku used his Kamehameha in space and managed to save his own ass. But the real question is, why would Goku need a spacesuit now as opposed to when he took Monster Carrot to the moon? Obviously, we know that Goku is not an Earthling. He is a Saiyan born on the planet Vegeta. So the question is, can Goku's race, although humanoid in nature, breathe or survive in space? Perhaps their bodies, as opposed to Earth humans, have the ability to not require as much oxygen. Perhaps their battle-hardened bodies were built to survive the pressure with tougher muscles and bones. Again, we find no answers to these questions in the guidebooks or in the series itself. None of this is really clear, but what is clear is that there is contradictory material right off the hop. In a previous edition of Dragon Ball In-Depth, I talked about how although Goku's father Bardock is not originally an Akira Toriyama created character, Toriyama did incorporate Bardock into the manga when Freeza had a flashback in manga chapter 307, and in this panel we clearly see Bardock in space surrounded by Frieza's men, just like he was in the Bardock TV special. So right there, Toriyama is telling us that Bardock can survive in space, and thus one can assume that others from planet Vegeta can as well, at the very least learn how to survive in space. Maybe Goku just hadn't learned that yet? During his fight with Freeza, the evil emperor destroyed the core of planet Namek, kicking off the longest 5 minutes in history. Afterwards, Frieza's confidence level shoots up and he constantly remarks to Goku that he can survive in space and Goku cannot. The word survive not breathe, are used in the original Japanese manga as well as the Japanese dub. However, in the Funimation English dub of Dragon Ball Z, they changed the line. In Dragon Ball Z episode 97 of the dub, Freeza says, and I quote, "I didn't plan on destroying myself, just you and the planet. I can breathe in space and you can't." The word breathe is only used in the dub. I'd like to tell you that it was fixed in Kai, and it sort of was, but then Funimation took a shit in the punch bowl with episode 53 of Kai. In the Japanese version, Goku says, "You can survive even in the void of space, right?" However, the English dub of Kai takes it upon themselves to change it to,
"You mentioned being able to survive in space without oxygen."
Oxygen? Why was oxygen even mentioned? Yet another dub change to confuse people, and this one's from the freaking Kai dub. Nonetheless, the planet explodes, and Goku does successfully make it off before it does, and Frieza does indeed prove he survives, floating in space until King Cold found him. Just remember, in the original Japanese, the word survive is used over the word breathe. Oxygen is not even mentioned, so it makes a bit more sense. Speaking of oxygen, let's fast forward to 2013's Battle of Gods film. In the movie, Goku's battle with the god of destruction, Beerus, sends both of them far above the earth. If you judge this fight by the film, you could say that the battle was technically still within the stratosphere, which is not deep space, but also not survivable whatsoever by ordinary mortals. But we're talking about God versus God, and both are anything but ordinary. However, in the Dragon Ball Super version of this fight, Goku and Beerus battle way beyond the stratosphere into deep space. One could also assume that Goku's exposure to the God power and God Ki granted him the ability to survive in space. Beerus, of course, is a god, so that's really all the explanation necessary. But what's strange is that episode 14 of Dragon Ball Super, Goku is fighting underwater and worried about running out of breath. Meanwhile, he apparently has no problem hanging out in space for a long time. Not to mention Goku is breathing and yelling and hollering underwater, something a man who cannot breathe cannot do. But hey, remember, it is a cartoon. Also in Dragon Ball Super, we clearly see Whis and Beerus in space breathing without any issues, and we see Vegeta and Goku, while traveling to go train with Whis, also breathing easily. Fast forward to 2015's Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F, a movie based on a story from Akira Toriyama himself. In the climax of the movie, the revived Freeza destroys Earth, and just before the planet explodes, Whis creates a barrier to protect the Z fighters, and during the conversation in space, Whis states that Freeza survived the explosion, but Vegeta could not survive in space. Now, wait a second. Vegeta, with the power of a god and with years and years of training, is unable to survive in space, and yet Bardock, a low-class warrior, can? Well, that doesn't make much sense, and I'm not even taking into account all of the filler scenes in the anime with Vegeta in space like it's an everyday thing. We saw it all the time in the anime, but remember, the only time we saw Vegeta surviving in space was in the anime. It was not in the original manga. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is it's yet another Dragon Ball inconsistency, somewhat. But there's more to it than that. If you strip away the filler and the anime and the new movies and just go by the original 42 volumes of the manga, there is no definitive evidence in any of the material that Goku cannot breathe in space, with the exception of Frieza's boast. And remember, just because Frieza assumed Goku wouldn't survive doesn't mean he really couldn't, especially since he did survive many volumes earlier. Note that Goku never replied or never actually denied the fact that he could or couldn't breathe in space. He never told Frieza anything. So there's actually more evidence that he can. Or maybe it's just Toriyama creating a dramatic effect and a layer to their fight to add suspense. But really, it's one big fat contradiction. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you down the stratosphere. Hey Super Tubers, don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and spread the word about the channel, and find me on these social media platforms.